Hi everyone, this is Madhuri Govindu. I am happy to be here with all of you and welcome you back to Soulful Conversations with Madhuri Govindu. I do have a very special guest, Garret Biss. And Garret, to introduce him, is the founder of the Diamond Mind LLC. Is a service disabled veteran owned small business focused on empowering veteran employees and transforming the organizations they serve. He's a veteran himself, a former Marine Corps pilot, a TED speaker. He's a recovery leader, and his programs are developed focused on positive psychology and post traumatic growth. And there's so much that I want to unfold with Garrett today because he brings along deep experience in the military, personal, and professional development and the addictions recovery industry. So, Garrett, welcome to Soulful Conversations and thank you so much for being with us here.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to have a conversation, some soulful conversations. We'll see what comes up today. But I just want to thank you before we start for the work that you're doing, the voice that you're bringing to those that have struggled, and the work that you're doing to help individuals through their own unique journeys.
Thanks, Garrett. I think in a lot of ways our journeys blend with each other, but today is about you, and I want to ask you. Of course, everyone wants to know about your journey from the military service to founding Diamond Mind. Just help us walk through your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so when I got out of the Marine Corps, I served for about 16 years in the Marine Corps. I retired in 2015, and it was all rainbows and sunshine, and everything was beautiful, and there was no challenges. Of course, I'm being facetious. Sadly, well, I mean, depends on how you contextualize this. Sometimes I say it was unfortunate, the challenges that I went through and some of the things that I experienced, but I've also grown to appreciate the challenges that I've gone through. And this is something that comes up a lot in the work I do around post-traumatic growth. It's finding positively associated meaning and value that's come from all of our life experiences, but especially some of the adversity and some of the hardships that we've gone through. So that's really what defined my journey out of the military. And if anybody's interested in a 10-minute snapshot of that personal experience, that's what my TEDx talk was all about. It's called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face. And what I realized and what I was living through was the reality of that transition from military service. It's similar to some other major transitions that people might experience and go through, but there's some unique factors and some unique kind of considerations for that transition from military service that I believe is the main catalyst that leads to the very high rates of mental health challenges, addiction challenges, and even the rates of self-inflicted harm that we're seeing in the veteran population. So I got to live that experience myself, gain some insight, and through that journey, through the darkness, coming away with a much greater appreciation for this common challenge that veterans go through, a clearer understanding of what exactly is transpiring and why it is so problematic for so many veterans. And then, fortunately, through my experience, I was introduced to, and a lot of different tools and information and insight and frameworks that were extremely helpful for me. So that's really what my business is all about now: is taking some of the insights and the tools and some of the processes that were extremely helpful for me, and of course, offering that to veterans in any capacity in any way that I can through different trainings and workshops and recovery coaching that I do, but also being of service to the veteran population at large by speaking with a lot of mental health professionals and recovery addiction professionals to help them better understand some of the nuances of that battle that veterans are going through and the struggles that they face so that they can better show up for that population as they're serving them.
Thank you, Garrett. The unspoken trauma, everyone. I'm going to place that TEDx link in my intro. Feel free to watch that, and I think that's so useful. What makes you so special and unique is I've been there, done that, and I'm bringing it back to the veterans community and also educating psychotherapists and addiction counselors like me on what are the unique challenges veterans face, which differentiate them from what civilians face. So, we would like to really appreciate and thank you for bringing this to all of us.
Well, it's my pleasure, and let's dig into as much of that as you want. And like I said, I trust this conversation will be insightful for maybe myself. Maybe I'll connect some new dots, or you'll share something with me, and we'll gain some new insights together. but I just want to, any opportunity I have to share some perspective or share some experience that can help other individuals, connect some dots in their own experience. That's something I'm grateful for, and I think something that's really valuable.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask you what inspired you to focus specifically on the veterans' challenges and potential. I think partially you've already answered that. Maybe an example for the civilian world or psychotherapists like me as to what inspired you to focus mainly on veteran challenges and potential. That would be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So I think, zooming out, so, the 30,000 foot view, as they say, there, unfortunately, in our society and in our country, there's tens of millions of individuals that are struggling with mental health challenges and addictions, or many manifestations of addictions. And what I've really come to appreciate and understand is that this population doesn't represent one pathway or one set of life experiences that culminated in a struggle with mental health or a struggle with addiction. What I really understand and appreciate, and if you ask, people in the field, or if you ask individuals that have studied trauma, studied addiction, if you ask them what is it that causes addiction, well, if you ask 100 people, you'll get at least 100 different answers on what the cause of addiction is. But if you look at all of everything that's presented and everything that's shared, there's at least a consensus that it has something to do with either biological, psychological, sociological, or spiritual factors. So that's a very broad brush, but I think it kind of ties together and encapsulates most of what we understand about the pathway into someone's struggle. Well, when I look at this population of about 40 million adults in America that are struggling with some behavior or some substance or some mental health challenge, I recognize that that's at least 40 million different pathways into that darkness, into the struggle that they're facing. That's 40 million different combinations of certainly some biological, sociological, spiritual elements, or combinations of experiences and environments that individuals have lived through that got them to this place that we label as, or we refer to as, a mental health challenge or a struggle with addiction. So this insight, and really what started to pique my curiosity was, okay, if there's so many different ways that somebody can enter into this struggle that they're experiencing, then how can somebody profess that there's only one pathway out of it, or 10 pathways out of it, or 1,000 pathways out of it? Really, I understand that for as many pathways as there are into the struggle, there's probably that many pathways out of it. Everybody that has gotten to some place where they're really battling a mental health challenges or or a substance related challenge, they're going to require their own unique combination of support, of tools, of treatment modalities, of environmental changes that can really help them overcome those challenges and get back to the place that they want to be in their life. So, with that kind of big, broad brush or 30,000 foot view, then if we look at the unique things that veterans experience, especially veterans that transition from the military, there's some unique factors and some challenges that are common to that veteran transition, or everybody that's gone through that veteran transition, that also compound this challenge that veterans face. And one of the reasons I started speaking so much about this was I felt that there was this unfair assumption or association in society at large, but also within the mental health community, that if you connect with a veteran and that individual is struggling with PTSD or struggling with a mental health challenges or they're struggling with addiction, there was this unfair association that, oh, that must stem from something that they experienced on the battlefield, or maybe a trauma that occurred during a training mishap or a military sexual trauma. And while sadly that's true for a lot of veterans that are struggling, it's not true for most veterans. Yet most veterans really have a major struggle when they transition from the military service. So this kind of, this really piques my interest and wanted me to better understand what it was, what could I learn from my journey and through some of the struggles that I faced, and how does that relate with other veterans that have gone through it? Because at the end of the day, and this is really what fuels my passion with this work specific to the veteran community, is I understand that if we look at all the most common modalities, whether it's treatment in inpatient settings or outpatient settings, or the different modalities that somebody might be introduced to in their own mental health journey, what I believe from what I've experienced is a lot of these different tools and modalities are generally developed with an individual in mind that sadly and unfortunately had a history of life experience where they didn't have the environment, they didn't have the experiences necessary in order to develop the strong foundation that they need for their mental and emotional well-being. That could be self-confidence, it could be a sense of belonging, it could be a sense of meaning. But whatever it was along their journey that they didn't get that they needed, this is what I believe a lot of individuals' pathway into those struggles are. So if we look at what most treatment modalities and programs and resources that are available, if they're developed or built with this individual in mind, well, that program or that framework is very different than the common experience for many veterans that find themselves with a mental health or a substance related challenge. Because I understand that regardless of what a service member experienced while they were in the military, that transition from service itself can be and is often a traumatic experience. If we look at the common veteran population and the stories that I would hear and the things that people would say to me of these veterans that were either involved in the criminal justice system or looking for something else to support the recovery journey, what I would often hear is I keep trying these programs, I keep going to these treatment centers, I keep showing up to these support groups. Yet it feels to me like everybody else's experience and everybody else's challenges, they don't map to my experience. There's something that is vastly different between the battles that they're facing, the journey that they've gone through, and the experiences that the veteran has gone through in their life. And what I realized was the population of veterans that are often struggling, they're also a population that had, at least at some point in their adult life, a very strong foundation for their mental and emotional well being. They had the self confidence, they had the sense of belonging, they had the positively associated identity, they had a strong sense of meaning. And it's not because in their early childhood, in their developmental years, or throughout some early experiences in their life that they lacked the ability to establish that strong mental and emotional foundation, but they've actually been through a transition which took away something from them that they already had. So, with this in mind, then the programs that we design and the way that we approach veterans that are struggling with mental health challenges, it can't be a simple carbon copy of a model or of a program or of a philosophy that is designed to, to really meet the needs of a different population. We need to recognize the uniqueness of the experience, the uniqueness of some of the challenges, and also leverage and appreciate the unique opportunities that are available to veterans seeking recovery that really aren't available for many other individuals that are struggling or are finding themselves in the darkness.
Right. And I think you brought out two very key points here for civilians and psychotherapists, that not every veteran's path is the same path, experience is the same experience. So their treatment can also never be a carbon copy. We can't copy paste that to every veteran. And I will include Garrett's information while I post this video. So if anyone wants to know what are these unique paths that he's offering, feel free to reach out to him. Gad, that brings me to my next question. Can you tell us a bit about your personal experience that shaped your approach to professional training and coaching, right? Just a quick sneak peek into your personal background or experiences that would help us.
Yeah, certainly. So as I've made that transition and really found from military service and found myself in the darkness, there was still a lot in me that was resistant or hesitant to reaching out for some of the traditional resources that might have been available. And fortunately for me, I was connected with some great mentoring and some great coaching at the time. And what I learned through that experience was the development that was kind of promoted in me and the support and the help that I got, though it wasn't intentionally or it wasn't done with the intent of dealing with some of the harmful behaviors that I was experiencing. But what I found was that void that was inside of me, or this source of pain that I was constantly trying to numb or escape, a lot of that began to heal. A lot of that began to close. And what I noticed, even though it wasn't my intention in this particular part of my journey to reduce my reliance on substances and behaviors that were causing some harm, what I found was as I began to do that work, as I was led and coached and helped to regain a sense of self-efficacy and self-esteem and a sense of confidence and regain a clear picture for something that brought meaning and purpose and value into my life, as I began to do that work, what I noticed was this propensity to want to seek something to avoid or escape or numb with that internal pressure, that sensation, that started to go away. So my journey into recovery was very unique in that regard, that I didn't start out step one seeking treatment for the behaviors that I was experiencing. I kind of took a different pathway to the same endpoint, to the same effect. I think everybody that's seeking recovery, they just want to experience a better version of their life that doesn't have a lot of the costs and a lot of the consequences that they're experiencing. And that's what I was led to. And through that journey, I realized there were so many things that I was introduced to that were extremely helpful for me that later, when I became more aware or more informed about what was often offered to individuals that were, taking that first step and seeking a more traditional treatment pathway, I realized there were a lot of things that were very valuable and helpful for me in my journey that could also be valuable for anybody else, whether they were seeking an alternative pathway or whether they were going through and participating in some more traditional treatment models or treatment pathways, but they wanted something else to kind of add to their repertoire, add to their journey to help them get a little bit faster. And one analogy that I often share that really helps describe this difference of approach or the opportunity for a multifaceted approach is the analogy of a hot air balloon. So
Mm.
if you can imagine a hot air balloon somewhere at some elevation in the sky, yet this hot air balloon or the elevation of it is somehow representative of how well somebody is doing in their life. So if that hot air balloon is going higher, that would represent that they're doing a little bit better, they're a little bit more successful, a little bit more flourishing, experience some greater preponderance of positive emotions. And if that hot air balloon were to go down, then that would be indicative of somebody who's getting a little bit, into a little bit more stress, a little bit more of a battle with some internal burdens that they're facing. So with this analogy, there would be two ways. We can see two ways that we could help increase the altitude of that hot air balloon. The first thing that we could do is we could identify any extra weight that was in the basket, maybe some sandbags that we're holding onto the side, and we could do whatever we could to reduce some of that load, some of the, whatever was holding it down, and that would allow the hot air balloon to go higher. Well, the other thing that we could do is simply put some more hot air in the hot air balloon. We could turn on that burner, we could raise the temperature, create more lift. That would also help it go a little bit higher. So I love this metaphor because this is how I understand the difference between traditional or pathology focused treatment or psychology and the other side, which is the positive psychology. So I understand that traditional psychology and a lot of the traditional programs and treatment modalities that we see, they are really focused on identifying what's wrong with somebody, helping them identify the symptoms, the defects, the diseases, the diagnoses that are representative of that struggle that they're having in their life. And then they can be very effective at helping reduce some of the symptoms or reduce some of that downward pull on that basket. And through that process, allowing somebody to let go of some of those things, heal some of those things, remove some of those internal or external barriers so they can get up to a better place in their life. On the other side, positive psychology is really a focus on what is right with somebody. What are the strengths that you have? What is the natural resilience that you've developed? What are some of the resources that you have internally and externally? And how do we leverage that in order to get to a better place, a place of more flourishing in your life, again, across many different areas or domains of your life? So with this analogy, it's also easy to see or appreciate how a multifaceted approach, one that is looking at some of the things that are holding somebody down. If you go and you're working in a clinical environment and they're helping you identify and treat and work through some of your diagnoses or some of the symptoms, that can also be supported by working on more of a, in the other domain of positive psychology and working with somebody, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a peer support specialist, helping you reconnect with some of the good things that are already within you that you can leverage in order to get to a better place in your life.
Mm. I'm going to steal the hot balloon analogy from you. Thank you for sharing that. That is incredible. And of course, the positive psychology, right? You eulogize and focus on the positive aspects of somebody. Such a wonderful reminder for everyone. When I talk to you about the diamond mind now, right? What was
Mhm.
the inception, the moment you realized, okay, I need to come up something like this? And what's the story behind the word diamond mind? And if you can just break down the core mission of diamond mind in your own words, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, certainly. So this might be another thing to include in the show notes, but are you familiar with the parable, The Acres of Diamonds?
I'm not. So
Okay,
please
so I'll share
share
a
with
link to that. It's a pretty short read, but this was a story, and if I recall correctly and understand it, so a gentleman by the name of Russell Conwell was out on the lecture circuit giving this lecture about this story, which he referred to as the Acres of Diamonds. And the very short, so this is going to be a spoiler alert here for anybody who hasn't read it and they want to go read it. But the very short version of the story was that it's a retelling of a traveler who was going through Africa, and he came to this one this one village, this farm, and he met the landowner, the farmer on this place. And as he was meeting with this farmer, he shared a story about this thing called a diamond. And he said, these little gems are so valuable that if you were to even find one, it would provide prosperity for you and abundance and wealth for you and your family for many generations. So this farmer decided, hey, I need to go find one of these gems. This sounds like something that I want to invest in a journey. So he ended up selling his farm and he spent the next couple of years traveling all around trying to find one of these elusive gems called a diamond. So unfortunately, he exhausted all of his resources. He spent his last dime, and he ended up passing away, destitute, never finding this thing that he was going for. Well, a couple of years later, this traveler comes back through the same village and he visits the same farm. And when he shows up at the farmhouse, he realizes there's a new owner. And he goes in and he's speaking with the new owner and he says, "Hey, I see what you have on your mantle." And he holds this thing in his hand and he says, "Wow, our friend, he found this huge diamond." And the new farm owner says, "I don't know what you're talking about, diamond. That's not something I've ever heard of. That's just some rock that I found down in the quarry down in the edge of our farmland." So the whole oh, what do you call it? The whole takeaway from this story or this parable was this farmer, he had everything that he thought he wanted in his life until somebody told him that there was something beyond him that was going to bring anything that he didn't want. So he woke up a rich man and he went to bed very poor because now he was yearning for something that he didn't have. And then he went and he saw it and he spent all of his time and his energy and his money trying to seek this thing that would provide him all of his joy, fill this new void that he had inside of him because it was this thing that he was yearning for. And all along, our friend, as he's traveling around the world trying to find these diamonds, was completely oblivious to the fact that he had everything that he could ever want back on his own farmland where he started from. So when I named my company is Diamond Mine, that's a reminder to me that as we're seeking for things external to us, whether that's through behaviors or whether that's through challenges with substances, anytime we seek something external to us to create or synthesize an internal feeling, it's going to be a continuous yearning, and there's going to be this desire in us that's never satiated. But if we remember that everything that we need in order to be the person that we want to be and show up how we want to show up and experience the life that we want is actually found within us or inside of us. And with the right coaching or the tools or the experiences, there's many times we can find those diamonds within us to experience everything that we want.
Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing. And
Yeah, thank you for asking.
yeah, talk to me about the programs and the workshops a little bit. I know a lot of those who are watching this will go back and look at your website and scroll through everything. But if you can just give us a high level view of for organizations or
Mhm.
veterans, like what types of programs and workshops do you offer? That would help us.
Yeah, certainly. So we already talked a little bit about positive psychology. So that really is the framework or a foundation that I use for a lot of the training or the workshops that I provide. Now that can be a short, 1 hour presentation or keynote, or it can be a long. I've got a program that's about 30 hours that I've developed, and this one's specifically looking at justice involved veterans. So any veteran who's been involved in the criminal justice system. One reason I'm really passionate about this subset of the veteran population is because I see and recognize them as a higher risk subset of an already high risk population. There's a lot of veterans that will be challenged and struggle with some mental health aspects or some substance related aspects. But once you get wrapped up in the criminal justice system, sometimes that's an extra large boulder that you have to contend with, and a more challenging path that needs to be navigated to kind of get out of that darkness. So the programs they're also typically there's a framework that I offer in the TEDx talk. It's the CAM model or CAM framework. And what this does is it really looks at those basic fundamental human needs that we have for our mental and emotional well-being. The first one is connection. So as humans, we are biologically hardwired for connection. The reason that we are the apex predator in the world and that we've done so much and can accomplish so much as the animals that we are is because we are not just a single organism, but we as humans, we really thrive when we're connected to other individuals. This can be in a small hunter-gatherer tribe tens of thousands of years ago, or even today. I mean, there's many things that we couldn't do in our own life to meet our own needs and provide for our families were we not the beneficiaries of other contributions that had gone before us. Whether you're getting in your car and driving to the store, well, there's tens of thousands of people that helped create that car that you sat in. There's many more people that helped bring the oil or the charging station to you so you could fill that up. There's people that laid the roads. There's people that stocked the shelves. at the store. So in every in regard here, even in our present life experience, we need connection to others in order to survive. And this is such a fundamental need that it's even hardwired into us. It's part of our DNA. There's many functions in our body that really help facilitate our overall health and well-being that are facilitated through connection, whether that's the connection that we experience, when we hug another person or when we do some pro-social, whether it's an act of service, an act of generosity, or experiencing something new with other individuals or laughing together as a group. These are all pro-social, pro-connection activities that we do. And one of the benefits of these activities is that it releases some oxytocin in our body. Now, sometimes we think of oxytocin as the bonding hormone or the love chemical, but really another major benefit, and maybe the primary benefit of oxytocin, is it helps reduce and relieve some of the cortisol that's in our body. So it can activate that parasympathetic nervous system, help us deal with, emotionally process some of the stresses that we have in our life. So without connection, without proper social connection, there's some very serious and very real negative implications. I don't know if you're familiar with the Surgeon General's report that came out a couple of years ago. It talked about this loneliness epidemic, and they found through some research that a lack of proper social connection has the same or similar adverse effects on your health as drinking 6 alcoholic beverages or smoking 15 or more cigarettes every single day. It will be no shock to anybody that those behaviors would have some negative implications on your overall well-being. Um, so if we lack that proper social connection, and through that connection, we also have this fundamental need for authentic connection. This is really the deepest kind of connection that we can experience. That's a connection where you can show up and for all the things that you can say or communicate or express to somebody without having to say a word. They just get you, they see you, they understand you, and they love and accept you for who you are. We all desire, we all yearn for some deep, authentic connections where we can express our wants, express our needs, and not fear that doing so will cost us that connection. The last need is the need for meaning. So I used to understand meaning as something that was, maybe it was positive. It could add some context to your life. It could help you understand some things. But through the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl and logotherapy, I've really come to appreciate that a strong sense of meaning and purpose in our life is also what provides our capacity to endure suffering. If we lack a sense of meaning, then the normal struggle that we have to go through as obstacles and challenges come up in our life, if there's no meaning associated with it, then that struggle becomes suffering. And we're hardwired, we're designed for struggling. We actually thrive the best when we have some struggle that we have to go through. In every way that I've recognized that I've grown or developed a skill or become a better version of myself in my life, it was never done without some kind of struggle. There was some kind of energy or some effort that was put into it, some obstacle to overcome, and that's what helped. That's what helped spark that growth or allow that growth to take place. So without these fundamental needs for connection, authenticity, and meaning, um, there's a broken foundation for one's mental and emotional well-being. So once we can understand that and have this lens with which to look at some of the work that we're doing internally or the resources that we're seeking, if we can understand it through this lens of helping somebody reestablish that positive sense of connection, that permission to be authentic, and the ability to experience the benefits of a sense of meaning in our life, then all of the other work around positive psychology really just wraps around that and helps reinforce that. So with the programs that I do, that's typically what is offered. It's first understanding the struggle that somebody's facing. I say one of the hardest things to experience, the hardest sources of pain, is when you are experiencing discomfort or pain and you have no idea where it came from. This is what I think a lot of veterans experience when they transition out of the military. This is what my experience looked like. I took off a uniform. I began to suffer. I began to feel like something was missing or something was lacking in my life. I began to experience the pain of that lost sense of connection, that loss of a sense of meaning to even help me overcome some of the normal challenges of life. But the hardest part was not experiencing that. It was not understanding where it came from or why I was struggling. I often say, if you and I were to get together some weekend and we went for a long run or a long hike or we went to the gym and had a really strong workout and we woke up the next morning and our muscles were a little sore, it would make sense to us. We'd say, oh, yeah, of course. It's because I exerted myself yesterday and now my muscles need to repair and there's some soreness that comes with that. But also because we knew where it came from, we would also have an understanding and hope that it was going to go away. We'd know, okay, it was a couple of days from now, this pain and this discomfort will go away. Well, if you woke up some morning in that same discomfort, that same physical pain in your body, but you had no idea where it came from, this is a huge barrier to experiencing that sense of hope or the thought that things can get better. So just providing that context alone, I think, is a major step forward in helping veterans. Might be the thing that helps them seek help. It might be the thing that helps them express some of the things that they're feeling and not feel like they're alone or that there's something broken in them and that's why they're struggling.
Yeah, yeah. And I think logotherapy, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and The Body Keeps the Score are attestations to everything that you have said so far. And since you've been there, done that, it absolutely exemplifies your experience as well as these applied positive psychology and recovery methods you use in your program. So I can attest to that as a mental health counselor myself. Um, Garrett, also tell me, I'm moving on to a little bit of an impact and transformation right now. If you can just share a success story where a veteran or an organization saw some tangible transformation, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of what I do in this field, and as you can appreciate, a lot of times we don't know the direct impact. Some of the work that we do, we just it can soften some rough edges. It can plant a seed, and sometimes that seed doesn't manifest or doesn't blossom for many years to come. So I recognize that not just in my work with veterans, but I also run an addiction recovery residence. It's a non-clinical environment where we just provide the safe, supportive environment or place where individuals can work on their recovery journey. So with that in mind, I always focus on sharing what I can that can be impactful or helpful and realize that many times the implications of what I've done won't be couldn't be quantified or won't be seen for many years. That said, last year I was invited down to do some work with some justice involved inmates in Georgia, kind of sharing this framework and this positive psychology model. Really, my mission with this extended program was to help map the programs and the tools and resources that were available to that veteran that was experiencing. So these were justice involved veterans that had struggled with some form of mental health or addiction related challenge. And that typical story that I shared, veterans would say, have said often to me, like, hey, I'm going to these groups, I'm going to these therapies, I keep trying these new interventions, but something doesn't really seem to map to or speak to my individual experience. So that was a big part of the mission, was just helping provide the container or the context or the frameworks where individuals could, these individual veterans could benefit more from some of the clinical services that they were a part of. And then the feedback that I got towards the end was uh, a lot of individuals saying, this finally the stuff that we need to talk about. We're tired of rehashing the same things that keep coming up over and over. And finally, this is a fresh perspective that helps provide a lot more insight. There were some veterans saying, like, now that I better understand the journey that I've been on and what I'm struggling with internally, now I feel like I can articulate it or I'm ready to begin to share that more with my family or with the clinicians that I'm working with. So that was just, some kind of great reinforcing message of the way it's received and the way that it's been impactful for some veterans.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'll move on to another piece that I think everyone wants to understand here. There could be a lot of them, and I have addressed this part in my book. Thank you for your service, Learning to Honor from Heart. But if you can help us with one misconception that companies have about veterans in the workplace and what we should be mindful of, or how do you address them, right? What would that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest, maybe it's, I don't know if it's a misconception or just a lack of understanding, is just what does that veteran experience look like? So sometimes people not knowing any better or not knowing any differently, they hear all of this noise about how veterans are broken, how veterans are damaged, watch out for the PTSD, watch out for somebody kind of flying off the handle. And if that infuses the way that they think or feel about veterans, well, then that's going to have some very negative implications for the way that they approach or work with veterans. So I guess the first step of that is just sharing this message about that transition from military service. One of the reasons I love speaking with non-veterans is through some of the ways that I describe the experience and some of the frameworks that I share. My goal is to help connect non-veterans with parts of the human experience that they can appreciate. Because sometimes there's this major barrier that goes up, especially in the mental health field, with like, hey, I never served, so I'm never going to understand what they've gone through, or they're not going to trust me enough to share, to for us to really get into some of the deep work that allows us to be effective. So part of my mission is to help connect the veteran experience to things that non-veterans can appreciate. When we come back to the basic fundamental needs we have for our emotional and mental well-being, or the disruption that happens when a veteran transitions, everybody understands that need for connection. Everybody knows what it's like to feel a sense of belonging. Everybody can understand the difficulties maybe that a transition in your life, whether that's a transition from living at home to going off to college or going off to the workforce, or that transition from when you moved from one state to another state and you lost your whole kind of friend network and that sense of belonging. Those are common experiences that a lot of humans have. And it's even though it's to a different degree or for a different reason, I think that better helps people, non-veterans, feel like they can understand and appreciate that veteran experience. So just providing that framework alone, I think is very helpful. I want people to not have concern or fear about approaching or bringing certain things up with veterans and not hide behind this fear that like, hey, I haven't lived in their shoes, so I have no idea what they're going through. I want to help bridge some of those, those connections through understanding, through hey, I have a little bit clearer picture on maybe some of the struggles that you're facing and maybe what that's like. And though I haven't been in your shoes, I've had some similar things in my own life. So that's a big part of it. And another thing that I think is really important, and I guess this could be shared both with veterans who are going out to the workforce or with those companies that are working with veterans, is understanding this comes back to the logotherapy that we're talking about, understanding the profound value and benefit that comes from having a strong sense of meaning in your life. When I'm speaking to veterans, I often share, I understand why, but it's very common for veterans when they transition from the military. They have no other metrics with which to grade any opportunity. So the one metric that they often think of is how much money can I make?
Mm.
Second, sometimes people want to go back to where they came from, so they're going to look for a job, wherever they came from. You're used to, at least your entire adult life, you're used to having a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. You're used to having some alignment with the skills and the talents that you've developed and the job with that, what is required of you of the job. So I understand why a lot of people don't consider that because it's like one of those things that you take for granted. If you don't understand the value of it, then many times you don't appreciate the value that it can have in the future or in your own future. So what I share with veterans is have a more profound understanding and appreciation for the role of meaning and purpose in your life. Of course, you've got to earn a living. Of course, you've got to support yourself and your family, but understand the cost. Maybe that's the more important thing. Understand the cost that comes from investing your time and energy in something that doesn't satiate this need that we have for meaning in our life, and understand some of the negative implications that are going to come up in your own mental wellness and in your own ability to experience joy in your life if there's a disconnect between what you're engaged in, what you're investing your energy in, and the role that you have professionally. And then with companies and with those that work with veterans or manage veterans, I want them to better understand and appreciate this role of meaning in our life. And this is what ties back to that sense of logotherapy. So I understand as Viktor Frankl's work, he shares that there's at least three fundamental ways that we can experience meaning in our life. In the first way, there's this term that really jumped out and caught my attention, this term coherence.
Mm.
And what I understand is that we can experience a profound sense of meaning when there's coherence between who we are and what's required of us. So if you've developed a certain skill set, if you've spent the last 4 or 20 years developing a certain skill set, but that skill set was required of you in your profession, then being in that profession alone can provide a sense of coherence. If we lose that coherence, if we spend all of our life developing certain skills and now those certain skills aren't required of us with what we're engaged in, then in many ways we're going to lose a significant sense of meaning that comes from the work that we're doing. So, with this in mind, if we can find any ways to better understand and learn the skill sets or the certain aptitudes that a veteran has, really any employee has, if we can understand the skill sets that they have and then engage them in work that draws upon those skills that they've developed, this is a tremendous step toward helping them experience that sense of meaning and self-worth and value and appreciation that comes from it.
Right. Coherence and some brilliant tips that you have offered for veterans in the workplace and how can we work better, collaborate better with veterans. So, going back to Diamond Mind again, right? Just have a twofold question for you on what is your vision for Diamond Mind? How is it evolving in the next 3 to 5 years? And if someone wants to collaborate with you for a broader initiative for organizational well being for veterans, how do they do that, right? Help us with that.
Yeah, great question. So in 5 years, I'm going to eradicate all the pain and suffering in the world. Everybody's going to be free of mental health challenges or addiction. All right, maybe that's a little ambitious, but we're going to work in that direction. So I've continued to seek more ways to serve, populations and individuals. I've been spending a lot of time in the last couple of years speaking with mental health professionals. One shift that I'd like to make, I want to start working more with veterans, so personally delivering programs for veterans. And then this curriculum that I developed called the Veteran Wellness Engagement and Resilience Training. I'd like to expand that so it can be delivered to more audiences, whether me personally, and then by 5 years from now, hopefully I've got some other trainers that can go out and facilitate workshops and presentations on this model. I'm also looking to get, wherever there's veterans that are struggling, which is everywhere. Anytime, there's about 18 million veterans in our country, about 250,000 more veterans every single year. Wherever those veterans are transitioning to, and I can connect with them, that's where I want to get to. So this year and next year, I'll be spending some more time on campuses working with student veterans. This is a very critical time to connect with veterans as they're going through the first couple of years of that difficult transition to help them create a vision for where they want their life to be and develop the skills and the resources necessary to have that sense of resilience as they continue with that transition. And then again, and of course, expanding my work with justice involved veterans. So I understand in our country, there's about 700,000 veterans that are somehow involved with the justice or the legal system. Of those 700,000, about 100 or 110,000 are currently incarcerated. So these are veterans that are inmates somewhere in our country. And then of those 600,000 other ones that aren't currently incarcerated, some of these are on probation, they're on parole, maybe they're awaiting adjudication. There are some great programs that have been established and that are helping connect with this very, high risk veteran population during this difficult time. Through the veteran treatment courts, there's been an expansion of veteran treatment courts. For those who aren't familiar, there's about 600 jurisdictions in our country that there is a whole court program. So if you are a veteran and you have some charges, you get involved in the legal system in some regard. For some of these veterans, there's a pathway where they can go through a delayed adjudication process, go through some treatment, experience some healing and some resources to deal with some of the challenges before they're ever adjudicated. Sometimes this results in reduced sentencing or some or some other benefits. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, of the 600,000 veterans, only about 10% of them have access to a program like the Veteran Treatment Court, whether it's because they live geographically in a location that doesn't have such a program, or because the nature of their charges were too severe for consideration for this program. So this, 500 and some plus justice involved veterans that are out there, that's really what I want to find is how do I deliver more programs for these veterans, help them with the same internal struggles and challenges that they're going through, regain a sense of that, the wellness and the resilience that they've lost or often have lost, so that they have the potential to experience a better version of their life.
Yeah. Working with hundreds of veterans in the last couple of years, I could already think of a handful of them who would need your help and the kind of help that you're doing right now. So, thank you for sharing that piece. One of the subset of veteran population that definitely concerns me is the first 30 to 90 days from when a veteran leaves the uniform to transitions into the civilian world. And that's a very sensitive period, according to me. Do you
Mhm.
have a piece of advice for those veterans transitioning into the civilian world, especially the first 90 days, Garrett?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm glad that you brought up this point because just like we talked about 40 million different pathways into the struggle, for veterans, there's 250,000 different experiences post transition. And I only say that because for some individuals, they have that sunshine and rainbows when they grab their discharge paperwork and they leave base for the last time. Um, Other individuals like myself, it was months leading up to that transition where the fear and the despair and the concern started to set in. Some individuals, it's might be 2 or 3 years after they transition before they're really confronted with the reality of some of the internal struggles that they're facing. I certainly agree that that first 30, 60, 90 days is a very important time to connect with veterans, if for nothing else, to plant that seed about these are some of the internal things that are happening. This is some of the reasons that you might experience some of this despair or experience some of this darkness as you move forward. And whether that defines their reality at that point or not, I think it's a critical time to at least plant that seed. Hey, these are some of the things from the human perspective. These are some of the things that are going to happen and that you might experience. And these are some of the things to be on the lookout for. This is how it's actually normal and to be expected if you experience some of these things. And then these are some steps, or these are some options that you have to deal with it as it comes up. I think that's a very important thing. There's many barriers that prevent veterans from getting even access to or seeking some of the care that is available. One sad statistic is that in the VA, there's only about 50% of eligible veterans that are eligible for VA services are enrolled in VA services. So that's only half of the population of eligible veterans that they're connected with. There's also some challenges, and this is one thing that I'm really trying to address. There's some challenge around messaging and around branding.
Mm.
So by this, I mean you got to look at the population of individuals that are veterans, former service members. There's something about this culture that makes us very opposed to highlighting ourselves, to admitting, pain, to admitting suffering, and trying to move through a challenge like that with the help of other individuals. So recognizing that's a major challenge, one of the things that exacerbates this challenge is developing all these programs that talk about PTSD this or suicide prevention that or mental health, diagnoses, whatever that is. An individual that you need to connect with that might be at very high risk for self-harm is not the individual that's going to voluntarily show up to a workshop or a presentation about suicide prevention. Can be great information, good to get out there to help other people, know what to be on the lookout for. But if you're trying to connect with that veteran who's in need, I think there's a very severe branding issue that we have that is not attracting the individuals that we want to serve to the services that we have to provide. So one of the ways that I'm addressing that is by branding things a little bit differently. All of the stuff that I do, for one, it's from a non-clinical perspective, so there's no diagnoses or challenges,
Right.
that are addressed, but offering it as a way to improve your resilience and a way to ensure your wellness, a way to experience greater success in your life. This can be something that can attract that audience of individuals to receiving some of that information, that care. Okay, when you're in the room and it's closed doors, we're going to talk about a lot of the same stuff, some of the contributing factors and things that we can develop or skills that we can hone in order to navigate or deal with some of those challenges. But I think we're casting the wrong net if we're trying to connect with those veterans that actually need the services the most.
Right, and such a brilliant point that you've offered right there, right? I feel educating the families and communities is also as crucial because the moment they come back, they gotta watch out for those signs to
Mhm.
ensure they are not lonely, like you said, the loneliness epidemic right now, right? And stuff like that. So I think there's a huge area to work in there. And you have all my support on whatever you're doing right now. I think you've packed this session with statistics, tips for us, so many parables and your procedures and methods that you do through Diamond Mind, and it's just been a master class so far, Garrett. So I would like to thank you for that, and I want to ask you any final thoughts or messages you want our audience to walk away with.
Yeah, great question. So first, you asked me this before and I didn't share, but if anybody wants to connect with me, the best way to do it is on LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm most active. You're also welcome to share my email address, and I'll send you a link actually for this show. It's a show notes page on my website where there's some free resources that people can go access. One of them is called the Warrior Reset. So it's really a recalibration of some internal drivers that we have to help establish or help promote a emotional, physiological, and in some ways even a spiritual reset. So if anybody feels a little stuck, or you feel like you're sliding backwards, or you feel like something's missing, so you're not firing on all cylinders and you're not sure why, then you can go have free access to this. It's called the Warrior Reset. There's another short series that I created for veterans that are in or seeking recovery, and it's called the Veterans in Recovery. very aptly named. But it's a short series of YouTube videos where I talk about some of these unique factors that veterans face and also share some of the unique opportunities that veterans have that many other individuals that are seeking recovery don't have to benefit from. And then, of course, there's a link to my TEDx talk on there. So I'll share that. As far as one last message to share with anybody that's listening, I want you to know that regardless of what you've experienced in the past and regardless of what you're going through right now, that you as a human, you as an individual, you're lovable and acceptable just as you are. And if there's something that's missing from your life, if you're experiencing the darkness, if there's some change that you want to experience in your life, know that you are capable of experiencing that change and that there are tools, there's resources, and there's people that want that change for you to be possible and they can help you through that journey. So if you're in that darkness right now, then take those first steps. Reach out, learn a little bit more about the experience that you're going through, reach out to somebody else. It can be a clinician, it can be a friend, it can be another veteran. But the minute that you start to share a little bit of your story, what you're going to realize is that some of the struggles that feel like it's just you and something that you're experiencing, maybe your own defect, you're going to realize that your experience is much more similar to many others' experience than you might expect. And through that process, through that disclosure, and through that sharing or that seeking of help, you can begin to take steps in that right direction to experience the life that you want and that you certainly deserve.
Yeah. You are lovable just as you are. We will definitely keep that in mind. I heartfelt gratitude to you, Garrett, for taking this time out and being with us and sharing such rich information. Viewers, we are talking to a diamond mind himself, right? And this is incredible, Garrett. I wish you good luck in all your future endeavors and all the success to you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.